Hi, this is Dr. Lisa, and today I am going to speak about Orientalism by Edward Said, the book which was published in 1978 and considered to be the preamble for the subsequent post-colonial field studies that Said established, such as The Question of Palestine in 1979, Covering Islam in 1981, and Culture and Imperialism in 1993. Reading this book will give you a wide understanding to the impact of the colonization on the colonized countries, particularly the Orient, in the Middle East, Asia, and North African countries. Impact in a sense that how the Western colonization countries produced knowledge, stereotypes, and discourses about the people and culture that were under their control, deciding on behalf of them how the world should see, understand, read, and perceive them, preventing them from presenting themselves. In other words, the imperialist colonial power. Well, the simplest way that I will recommend to read this book is to look at it as a critical to Western writers about the East. But you have to keep in mind that the project behind this book is to decolonize the knowledge and culture. The most significant idea in this book is intellectual decolonization. To decolonize the knowledge, the mind, the culture. Said wanted to analyze these discourses, how they were framed, formulated, and how the self and the other can be placed in any kind of discourse, work, and knowledge. And here the notion of self and the other comes to the surface. We find Edward Said has followed Foucault's ideas on knowledge and power, where the relation between power and language is verified in his thesis, where the power is linked to the formation of discourse categorizing personal and institutional relation and political implications on the discourse. His notion that it is within a particular range of ideas that the institutional framework in particular kind of range of practice of knowledge the discussed rhythm is already created. So the modern Western notions about the others, the non-West, is basically already consisted by hegemonic notion about the other. Some might even consider that the Western modernity actually could be emerged because of this kind of constituted notions, not the other way around. Meaning that not the modernity created hegemonic notion about the other, but it is the hegemonic notion about the other is enabling Europe in the colonial power to deal with the Orient in a particular manner. And here exactly where we can see that many people have misreading Said notion, because most of Said thought is talking about the implications of the Western modernity on the discourse about the other. He spoke about the emergence of the hegemonic notion about the Orient and modernity giving kind of a practical expression, institution expression, academic expression, expressing in knowledge terms of that hegemonic European notion. So Said has given us two ways to look at Orientalism. First one, Orientalism as a style of thoughts based upon an ontological and epistemological distinction made between the Orient and most of the time the Occident. The Occident may not be existed according to Said. It is not there. It is something imagined against the Orient. You must be knowing that ontology is a set of the concepts within a discipline or field of study that ensure a common understanding of the information. So according to Said, the categorizing of the East and West as ontological knowledge is a constructed categories. They are not a nation states or geographical states, but mostly culturally existed. So the East and West is created in people's mind, particularly in the colonial domination and controlling powers. Said called this ontological distinction between East and West as imaginary geography, which is not fit within our reality. But in the imagination of the people, there is East and West. And despite being an imaginary thought, it is very, very powerful. That can affect our views, our life, our identities. And that is where the power in knowledge discourse become very, very significant. The epistemological distinction is related to the study of the origin, nature, and the limits of the human knowledge. So when we say that there is epistemological distinction, there is knowledge is being produced about the other. In this book, the knowledge is produced from the Occident about the Orient. The problem with this kind of knowledge is the domination, hegemonic knowledge production from the West about the East, producing knowledge about the other, creating reality about them. Here we find the Orientalism is looking at the nature of knowledge, looking at the knowledge from Occident about the Orient. So the project from this book is about to look about the way in which knowledge is being constructed about the Orient from the Occident. Orientalism can be read as a Western type of power. So Orientalism can't be Eastern in any kind of way, because the ontological aspect is already there, meaning that the ontology is previous to epistemology. The knowledge from one about the other, beside to the colonial character. So Orientalism assumes that there is existence of the Orient and Occident. The process of producing a particular specific knowledge about the other is there. So the subject, which is the Occident, who is producing the knowledge about the Orient, which is the object, is there. And more importantly, this object is never granted the position to be the subject. And this is the definition of the discourse of power or the hegemonic discourse. According to Said, Orientalism is accepting the basic distinction between East and West and considering it as a starting point for elaborating theories, epics, novels, and social description and political accounts. And on the basis of this knowledge authority, we find that colonialism, from the basics of this Western knowledge authority, where we can find that the subject and object, subjectivity and objectivity. So colonialism in knowledge terms is discourse of the othering, where the object position is granted to it. And any kind of anti-colonial exercise is talking about the self, like self-determination, self-ruling. And because of the self is demanded to present, the Orient was given the position of the object. There is another crucial point in which Said has talked about, which is orientalizing the Orient, in which Said is trying to explain that even as an audience, if we didn't fit into the definition of the Orient to us, we try sometimes to fit ourselves into it. You can bring a bunch of examples about that, either trying to adopt with the Western ideas, culture, or lifestyle, without even thinking deeply what the reasons behind of doing that. So we can extract 3 levels of Orientalism here. First, at the academic level, where anyone who teaches, writes, research on Orient considered to be Orientalist. Second level, which is more generalizing, where the ontological and epistemological distinction made between the Orient, most of the time the Occident. So at this level, we are speaking about the character of this knowledge specifically. The third level in which Orientalism can be discussed and analyzed as the corporate institution for dealing with the Orient, dealing with it by making statements about it, authorizing views of it, describing it, teaching it, ruling over it. In short, Orientalism as a Western type for domination and having authority over the Orient. What this book tries to demonstrate as well is trying to show the European culture gained in strength and identity by setting itself against the Orient as a sort of surrogate, where we can find the Orient, which is the object, can be produced in any process of knowledge. But this, the other, or the object, the subjectivity of it is not recognized. Because if they recognized the subjectivity of the other, that would be dialogue, which is not happening inside opinion. But rather, it is subject versus object. And with its all institutional process that it is happening, there is no way to come out of this. And that is precisely why Edward Said was recognized as the most significant figure of the post-colonial thinkers, who tried to address the problem of hegemonic discourse in raising the issue of decolonization of knowledge. Hegemonic in a sense that where there is a subject position given to someone, there must be an object position that given to another one. Unequal thing. The human equality was never spoken about. What was spoken about is the differences, and that is why it became hegemonic. The colonial discourse is the way of knowledge was produced or existed, and how that impacted in Western societies. And the post-colonial as a system of thoughts finding out the colonial discourse in the knowledge rhythm and criticizing it. So first, we have to find it out. And this is what Said was trying to do with this book. And then, after finding out this discourse, and post-colonial basically is to try to change this hegemonic discourse and to change the subject and object dichotomy and return the subjectivity to those whom were given the object position all the time, or the position of the other in the colonial discourses. Orientalism discourse comes from the notion that presenting or speaking about the others not as how they really are, but as we think about them. There is a kind of exclusion to the other. There is no voice. The subjectivity is excluded according to Said theory. Now, if you think about it, in any other disciplinary, there is no harm with that. But in social sciences, in human studies, we are talking about the nature of the humans. We are speaking about people, about the culture. Their subjectivity matters. Then your knowledge production process becomes much more complex when there is a kind of a dialogue, when you recognize the subjectivity of these people, and when you recognize their voice. But in the way that Orientalism is happening, this is not there, according to Said. Avoiding the other, neglecting the way that the other think about themselves. For example, Lord Cromer last annual report from Egypt consequently proclaiming that Egyptian nationalism to be an entirely novel idea and a planned exotic rather than indigenous growth. Now, this kind of decolonization of the mind, this is not how the Egyptians think about themselves, but this is how the colonizer think about them. This illustrates neglecting the existence of the other and how they think about themselves. We can take another example. Arthur James Balfour, when he spoke about Egypt, and I'm quoting, "Egypt is what England knows. England knows that Egypt can't have self-government. England confirms that by occupying Egypt for the Egyptians, Egypt is what England has occupied and now govern. Foreign occupation, therefore, become the very basic of the contemporary Egyptian civilization. Egypt requires, indeed, insisted upon a British occupation. Now, this is exactly the question of power and knowledge relation is being recognized. Those kind of knowledge as a colonial knowledge. This is ontological division and epistemological division. As well, this is the colonial discourse. And our book Orientalism is just an example of that. This is the hegemonic discourse. For an A to be civilized, there should be B, which is uncivilized. For a country to be developed, there should be underdeveloped countries. The hegemonic discourse works in three different directions. First one, assertion of the European identity, subjection assertion. Second one, creating the object. And third one, the production of knowledge about them in a way that asserts the superiority of the Occident over the Orient. At the same time, orientalization the Orient, meaning that stressing that this is the identity of stereotyping fits perfectly on the other side, or the object who will try also himself to fit perfectly in that position. Despite the popularity of the book Orientalism, it also received a wide amount of criticism from thinkers such as Albert Hourani in his book A History of the Arab People in 1991. And of course, Bernard Lewis in his book The Question of Orientalism, Islam and West in 1993. And by that, I will be concluding this lecture. This was the most significant highlights about the prominent thinker Edward Said masterpiece Orientalism. Hope you got the benefit. See you next time. This was Dr. Lisa.